And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 77th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 407th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, May 31st, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday evening when Juwan Morgan announced that he will be returning for his senior season, setting the stage for one of the most highly anticipated senior seasons in recent IU memory. I mean, think about it. Given how quickly good players move on to the NBA nowadays, it is rare when an all-conference level player is a senior and the unquestioned leader on a team with Big Ten title aspirations. Yogi Ferrell filled that role in 2016. DJ White did it in 2008. But there really aren't many others in the last 2 decades of Indiana basketball. In both Yogi and DJ's cases, they entered their senior seasons poised to cement their legacies as all-time IU greats while relying on highly touted freshmen to plug huge lineup holes. Yogi needed Thomas Bryant to stabilize the interior after a season in which Colin Hartman and Stan Robinson had played center. Thomas did, and Indiana won a Big Ten title. DJ White needed Eric Gordon to provide the outside punch that would balance his strong inside presence. Gordon did, and that team was 24-4 before scandal detonated a once promising season. Juwan Morgan enters his senior season looking to improve upon a breakout junior campaign individually. If he does, and if he stays healthy, knock on wood, he has a chance to etch his name among the top 40 or 50 players in the history of Indiana basketball, a major accomplishment given how many great players have worn the cream and crimson. But as last season proved, Juwan can only do so much on his own. For Indiana to achieve success as a team this year, Juwan will need more consistent help on the perimeter than he got last season. And we all know why there is reason to believe that help will be there this season. Romeo Langford is the latest 5-star freshman who will look to help propel his senior leader to a successful final campaign. With Juwan and Romeo, Indiana will enter most nights with the best 1-2 punch on the court. On many nights, they will have the best 2 players on the court, period. That's a recipe for a lot of winning. How much winning? I can't wait to find out, and I'm sure you agree. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is one of the world's most respected bracketologists. He's the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one publication recently referred to him as the Brad Stevens of girls' youth sports coaching. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Yeah, it's funny how much can change in a week, where last week we were trying to figure out what we were going to talk about on the show. And this week you got Juwan coming back. You have Archie's appearance at Huber's. You got the IU Duke news. So that is, things can change quickly, but exciting to have the roster essentially finalized at this point with Juwan's decision official. And so now we really start to look forward with a little bit more clarity at what IU is going to look like, what the Big Ten in and of itself is going to look like. There are, a couple teams that they got hurt by some of the, guys making decisions, but for the most part, people came back. So league should definitely be interesting, maybe a little tough to figure out. Like usual, I don't know that there's a dominant team, but exciting to at least have as much clarity as we're going to get until people actually start playing games at this point. So we can start to talk about it at least a bit more educatedly as we think about where IU fits in the pecking order. And I think the early returns, as you look at, some of the updated top 25s and updated, Big Ten early projections seem to be good. So a lot of reason for optimism, really deep roster. That was one of the things that, I kind of took away, was to talk about the competition and all those kinds of things. And I think that what is to me as exciting as anything. And just as an aside, I think there's going to be some interesting content coming out from the IU basketball Twitter account. They had Jerod Davis just had a vlog that was up and kind of followed him around for a day. I think it was like 8.5 minutes or so. It was really well done. I know you tweeted out the Juwan Morgan video yesterday, so doing a lot of cool stuff there to get people even more excited about the team. And in the case of the Jerod video, give a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, which should be cool, and a little something else to help get us through the offseason.
And now, to my right, he's a man who is still patiently awaiting his invitation to deliver the keynote address at the Huber's Winery event, so no one tell him that it was Wednesday night. He's a columnist for The Big Lead, and while everyone else is fawning over Juwan Morgan's return to Indiana, he is celebrating the return of another accomplished Big Ten senior, his all-time favorite player and personal pivot hero, the great Ethan Happ.
Oh, this is so wonderful.
He is Ryan Phillips.
Was you saying something? You can't tell me nothing. You can't tell me.
Ryan, what is your rant this week?
I like the song choice this week. I mean, I don't know what your definition of celebrating is with Ethan Happ's return, but clearly we have different ideas in that department.
It's called sarcasm.
Yeah,
sarcasm.
Well, you didn't pull it off there, buddy. No, I think the big news, of course, is Juwan Morgan returning, as you discussed, and so did Andy. But I think it's worth noting that Indiana will play Duke in Durham this fall. Third time in 4 years we played Duke. What is with the Big Ten? Can't we just stretch it out a little? We always seem to beat North Carolina. Can we play North Carolina every year? Why has it got to be Duke? Why? But in Durham, it'll be a chance for some of these guys to, particularly, I guess, Juwan, to maybe throw a haymaker back at Duke for that really awful performance a couple years ago in Durham. Certainly something that I think a lot of Indiana fans would like to lose from their memory, and a good performance there will straighten things out a little bit. So I think it's a great opportunity. At the same time, I'd really like to see us not play a team that's going to be ranked in the top 5 every time we do the Big Ten ACC Challenge. I'd like to mix it up a little, see some different teams. Heck, send us to Virginia. Let's play them. They like to lose to teams they shouldn't. So why not? But
ouch. Poor Virginia.
No, there's no poor there. They lost to UMBC. That's their fault. They ruined brackets this year, Jerod. All right. But I think that's a great opportunity for Indiana, a great opportunity for Archie Miller. Put him on national TV against a really good team with, Romeo Langford, as you mentioned, Juwan Morgan, a lot of other guys back, chance to step up in competition and really do something. I think that'd be a great early season matchup. I think we're all looking forward to.
All right, so the topics and the questions that we're going to address this week, we'll talk a little bit more about this IU-Duke matchup, which broke, just about an hour before we started recording. Then obviously we'll dive in more and talk about Juwan Morgan's return. What is the ceiling for his senior season? What is the impact of him coming back? Some of the lineup issues, lineup possibilities, really, that Indiana will have. Also, we'll talk about what stood out from Archie Miller's comments at Huber's Winery, and then we'll close by answering your questions. And we're definitely going to save time for questions this week because you guys really sent in a lot of them, a lot of good ones. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio, and that's what you're listening to right now, Assembly Call Radio. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And guys, let's just dive right in and talk a little bit more about this IU-Duke matchup. So, one of the things that Archie talked about at Huber's Winery was that some of the things that they have, that they're waiting to do for the schedule, they need to know, they need to know who they're going to be playing in the ACC Big Ten Challenge and when that game is going to be. They've got to nail down some of those dates so that they can fill in around it. And when you look at the impact of this game now, you have a non-conference schedule for Indiana that has Duke, has Marquette, Louisville, and Butler. So you've got some real heft there, with those 4 games that are really going to be good for the resume. And now, it'll obviously be interesting to see what Archie does with the rest of the schedule. He sounded, at Huber's like he was very committed to it being a tough schedule, a tougher schedule than last year. Having Duke right there on the schedule again is certainly going to help that. But Andy, as you look forward to this matchup with the Blue Devils, there's a lot of storylines. Cam Reddish is one of the incoming freshmen for Duke. He was Jake Forrester's high school teammate. 4 of the top 5 players in the class of 2018 will be on the floor in that game. 3 for Duke, and then obviously Romeo Langford. But when you look at what Duke has coming back, in addition to the freshmen that they're adding, how good do you think they will be by late November with a more experienced Indiana team coming in there to take them on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to have obviously a lot of roster turnover with Duke now that Ryan's boy, Coach K, has embraced the one and done era in a way that few thought possible.
Let me say that Coach K has done a lot for charity. That one didn't fit. That was a miss on that.
Just trying to shoehorn him in at some point. So I think it's, if there ever is a good time to play at Cameron, I guess that's it. Just in the sense that, they're still going to be probably figuring some things out. They lose Grace now, and they obviously lose Bagley, Wendell Carter, Trevon Duval. So certainly a talented group of freshmen coming in, but as it's going to be the case that it's going to take a little while for them to mesh. Although I think they're doing a exhibition tour in the off season. So that may, accelerate that a little bit for them. But I don't think there's ever a good time to go to Cameron, but I guess earlier is better. And maybe you catch them still in a transitional period, although IU has a lot of roster changes as well, and they'll probably be sorting some things out themselves. So should be a good game, good early test. It's kind of a, no lose proposition though for IU. It's going to help your strength of schedule. Gives you a good early measuring stick of where you are before you start heading into Big Ten play, because I think those early Big Ten games are going to fall right on the heels of that, if I'm remembering correctly, how things worked last year. So it's a good barometer to figure out how far you are. And if you play well, then great. If not really a game that you're expected to win under any circumstances. So you're kind of playing with house money in my eyes.
Yeah, one thing about Duke is they're not going to have a ton of size like they did this past season. So that'll be good for Indiana. That was one of the things they struggled with against Duke this year, was just the sheer size of everybody on the roster. There's going to be a lot of 6'7", 6'6" guys, but they're not going to have a 6'11" guy like Marvin Bagley patrolling the paint, or a big dude like, who's the other guy?
Wendell Carter.
Yes, thank you, Wendell Carter. In the middle, just dominating things, and as far as affecting shots and things like that. I mean, Deron Davis did really well against those guys, but again, once he got into foul trouble, the team really struggled against that. So it's going to be a lot of wing play for Duke this year, a lot of guard play, and I think that's something that IU can counter.
Is this a game where Indiana's going to miss Deron? Because it sounds pretty clear from what Archie said at Huber's that he's not going to be ready early season. Certainly not going to be 100%. And this was a game that he really played well last year in, and was a big part of the reason why Indiana had a chance to win with 5 minutes to go. So do you see this as a game where they could really miss him?
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's a big guy who can score. You're going to need that against Duke, because Duke's going to score a lot of points. That's just what they do. That's the way Coach K's system runs. And points in the paint are easy points. You toss it into Deron, he goes to work and gets you a bucket. But the other guys will have to step up. And if it goes as we expect, and Deron is out until let's just say January, giving him about a year of recovery time, which is probably about right for that injury. I think that you're going to have guys who have been used to playing at that point for him, have been used to practicing in that position, have been used to being on the floor in that position. So I don't think it's going to be as dire as it would have been had he not played last year, because there is more depth up front. But at the same time, of course, you're going to miss him. He's a big guy who can score and has the confidence of having done it last year against Duke. So it's going to be a loss no matter how you shake it out.
You do. I think the challenge though for him would be coming back that early. Duke's going to put him in a ton of pick and roll scenarios where we know even at full health last year he struggled a bit, and because they are going to be a little bit smaller, right, there's not really a clear matchup for him. I mean, I'm just looking at the NBC Sports, like their projected starters for the early top 25, and like Javin DeLaurier would be their 5-man, who's really more of a kind of wiry guy who's probably more fit to play the 4 and a good athlete. So, the flip side of that is he could give them some trouble. I think they'd give him trouble on the other end of the floor. So maybe it cancels itself out to a certain extent.
That game, the date hasn't been set yet. It will be sometime between November 26th and the 28th. Thanksgiving this year is November 22nd, so it'll be after that. So we will look to see when that date occurs, and then we will obviously look to see the rest of the non-conference schedule get filled in after that. All right, coming up, we are going to assess the impact of Juwan Morgan's return now that we know for sure that he is back. Talk about some of the lineup possibilities. Talk about what maybe the ceiling for Juwan's senior season is. And was Ryan actually right with his crazy prediction about Juwan from last August? We're going to discuss. Stick with us.
Well, there's people and more people.
All right, beautiful. Hello to everybody watching live. If you are watching live right now while there is NBA Finals action going on, you are awesome, and we greatly appreciate you. How's that game going so far, by the way?
12-10 Golden State.
Okay.
Oh, 13-12 for LeBron just hit a 3.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
7 minutes, 30 seconds left in the first.
Okay.
This game is over.
All right. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so people are asking to explain the background. Literally, I came into my office last Friday. I was sick of looking in the same direction, and I just wanted to move my desk, get a little bit of a just kind of a change up. So I decided to move it here, and I thought having the whiteboard behind me would offer some interesting possibilities of being able to do a rundown and do some other things. But Chad in the chat, I think you're right. It needs maybe some kind of color, get something up, some cream and crimson in the back. But that is
the
why.
rundown needs to stand out a little more. Like I can barely read it.
Okay, so I can write it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, maybe bolder, and then maybe off-centered a little so you can see it more.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a little tough to read.
Okay.
It looks like I'm looking through.
I can move over a little bit.
You know what, the doctors when they change the eye doctor when they change the things, it's a little fuzzy like those.
Okay.
So.
Okay, that may be hard to do with the autofocus from the camera. But we'll work on.
Well, I don't think that's a problem. I think if it's bigger, you'll be able to read it and make it out. So
cool. All right, so let's we'll talk Juwan here, and this can bleed into segment number 3 if we want it to.
Do you have his career numbers?
His career numbers?
Yeah, are you gonna?
I don't, but I do have his junior year numbers because we can compare him to DJ White because a lot of people are making that comparison.
I don't love that comparison.
Well,
maybe numbers wise.
It's an imperfect comparison as players, but we can get into that too.
Okay,
but
if we're not talking about players, then
no. But there's some similarities just in terms of kind of role and being a senior and the roster makeup and that.
No, that I'm fine with. Yeah,
they're definitely different players.
As far as what they mean, let's see.
Okay,
16 and a half. Let's see totals. So he.
Andy, do you have any particular Juwan angles that you want to make sure that we hit, or you just want to hit the ones?
We can just go wherever. Yeah, that's fine.
830 career points.
Nice.
So he needs
he didn't do
170, and he got 512 last year. He had more than half of his career points last year.
No, he was actually healthy.
Yeah,
and he was the focal point.
I'm surprised he played in. Okay, this can't be right. It says he played in 32 games in 2016-17 and 30 in 15-16.
He didn't play in a lot of games early his freshman year.
But he played in 30, it says. That's a lot.
Oh, his freshman year?
Yeah. Is this maybe just listing the amount of games the team played? Because did he really play in 32 as a sophomore?
Man, I thought he missed some.
So did I.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we can investigate
What
that.
site are you looking on for that?
Basketball reference.
Yeah,
I'm just looking on Ken Palm just to see
look
what
on
it says
Ken
on
Palm because they have the number of games.
Yeah, that lines up. 30 and 32.
Wow.
I guess he was just banged up in a lot of games.
Yeah.
And
well, wasn't there the stretch where he missed one game, come back, miss another game, come back? I guess.
Yeah, and he would get hurt in games.
Yeah.
He actually played.
Someone in the YouTube chat just said, ever since Ryan predicted the Juwan Morgan breakout, I'm obligated to believe everything he says from here on out.
Boom. Wow.
You didn't predict a Juwan breakout, actually, and we have the tape to prove it. You just predicted.
He actually played a lot more minutes in 2017 than I would have guessed. He played at least 20 minutes a game for the last, 15 games of the season. Just kind of eyeballing it here.
I mean, if I said the guy could go pro, I said it was a possibility. That's obvious of a breakout, isn't it?
I was giving you a hard time.
Someone just said I can't believe everything from a Padres fan. I have never claimed the Padres are good ever, at not once. So
Hey, he's just saying from a Padres fan, and you are clearly that. Your Twitter account proves it. Okay, let's get on to segment 2.
All right.
Are we ready?
Yep.
All right, let's do this. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. If you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are 2 great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call, or you can watch our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and participate in the live chat on YouTube. For better or worse, you will get all of the between segment banner that doesn't make it into the radio or podcast edit, which in a recent episode included this doozy.
I've been involved in poop explosions, plenty of them.
Yeah. Subscribe on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. So, gentlemen, I would like to kick off our discussion of Juwan Morgan. That's who this segment is going to be about, by playing a clip. And this is a clip that some of our longtime listeners will probably remember. It's from August of 2017, so last offseason. And remember, this was back when Juwan was more of a tantalizing but injury-prone question mark, really, rather than the second-team all-conference player that he became last season. So I'm going to play this. It's about 45, 50 seconds. If you guys want to jump in at any point, let me know. But let's listen to this, and then we're going to assess it afterwards.
Juwan Morgan could go after this year if he's healthy, I think.
Could go where?
Go pro.
Juwan Morgan?
Oh, yeah. Dude, we'll talk later. I'll tell you why.
Oh boy.
I mean, is there any other reason why someone would go to the NBA besides they're a really good player? I mean, I just don't think he's good enough to.
Oh, no. I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to they're starting to go after these Swiss Army knife guys, and he's going to be one.
Wow.
I'm telling you.
I mean, I like the confidence.
No, I'm not saying he may not even be first team All Big Ten, but I think he could go because of the Swiss Army knife factor. I'm very confident that could happen. I'm not saying it will, viewers. I'm not predicting that. I'm saying he could.
Hashtag 2-year plan. Hashtag 2-year plan.
There it was.
Shut up.
Bingo. That was back when we were playing bingo. I forgot about bingo. We need to get bingo going again. So, okay, we're back live now.
Jerod in the rare role of the skeptic in that clip.
Yeah, I know. It was quite the role reversal. So, okay, before we talk about anything, all right, I just want to take a moment and appreciate the cover your rear end disclaimer that Ryan used there, because it truly is a thing of beauty to go out on a limb, but then totally cover his rump if it doesn't happen.
I'm very confident that could happen.
I'm very confident that could happen. A statement that could literally be applied to basically everything. So that's how confident that you were in your statement that you had to cover.
But I'll try to try.
Yeah.
Laugh all you want, man. I was right. He had his breakout. I'm sorry. I'm taking it. I'm taking the W on this one, and I'm just gonna let you two do whatever you want. I thought 100% right.
You weren't 100% right. You were about.
I said he could go pro.
But yeah, but anybody could go pro. So that's look, he had a better season than any of us thought. You were on that. He got himself on the NBA radar. I wasn't anticipating that. You were, but he couldn't have gone and gotten drafted. Otherwise, he would have. So you
could have been a second round pick, maybe.
Yeah, but he probably would have gone.
No, but he had the ability to go pro. He could have left, and people would have been like, "Yeah, he should have come back." But yeah, I'm sorry. I think that
right, but it wasn't like a slam dunk. All I'm saying is,
I didn't say it would be a slam dunk. I said he could go pro if he has a good year, and he put his name in the draft, and people were like, "Yeah, he should put his name in the draft." And he came back, but he put his name in the draft, and it didn't seem ridiculous. Thank you.
Right.
Second team All Big Ten. If he was on a better team, he would have been first team All Big Ten. I think we all agree with that. I predicted a Juwan breakout, and he broke out. You don't have to try and compete with me, Morris.
No, I'm giving you most of the credit. Okay,
this is a perfect matchup of someone who never wants to admit that they're wrong and always wants to be right, and 2 other people who never want to give that person the satisfaction of actually saying they're correct. So
it's the beauty of the show.
I'm not really sure.
That's why people listen.
But
thanks a lot, Juwan. Thanks a lot.
Andy has just divulged the secret of our success.
All right, so let's talk about Juwan. And let's look ahead to his senior season. And I think the first angle that would be interesting to talk about is, expectations for Juwan as a senior. He's not going to be a guy that's going to have everything on his shoulders like it felt like a lot of times he had last year. There were obviously games where, where Robert Johnson stepped up or other guys stepped up. But I mean, every game there was such a big load on Juwan. And as I mentioned in my banner moment, he's going to have other guys now, Romeo Langford, but also other guys who are going to help him. The comparison that gets made most often for Juwan's senior season is a guy I mentioned earlier, which is DJ White. And I want to take a quick moment and remember what DJ White did as a senior, because his senior season was outstanding, just to make sure people respect that comparison, because DJ was Big Ten Player of the Year. He was a second-team All-American. He averaged 17 points, 10 boards, 1.6 blocks, and he shot 60.5% from the field. So if Juwan is going to do something like that, and I think it's important to note they are very different as players, but I understand why the comparison is getting made because of their role, because they're seniors and the roster makeup, all of that. Juwan last year was second team All Big Ten. He's likely to be preseason first team this year. And last year he averaged 16.5 points, 7.4 boards, 1.4 blocks, and then, 1.2 steals and 1.5 assists, which are numbers that DJ didn't do. And he shot 63% from 2-point range and has more versatility to his game. So given the extra freedom that he should have without all the attention being on him, the versatile nature of his game, I don't think it's crazy to think that he could have a senior year like DJ White. Now, whether he's Big Ten Player of the Year or not, that's, that depends on a lot of other factors. But, Ryan, you saw him play up close. I don't think it's a crazy comparison as long as people aren't saying that they're that similar as players.
Well, let's remember also DJ White could have taken a redshirt year, could have applied for a medical redshirt and played an extra year. So he had only really played 2 years during his senior year because he was injured during his sophomore year after a few games. So Juwan has way more experience than DJ did going into his final collegiate year. Now, look, DJ was good enough to get drafted in the first round as well. So there was no reason for him to take that medical redshirt. So Juwan actually has more experience. He knows the Big Ten better than DJ did. And he has gone through the same sort of thing with losing a coach. DJ had his freshman year, that sophomore year where he was injured and he lost Mike Davis, had to play under a new coach during the next 2 years. I think that that's similar to Juwan. Had one coach for 2 years, another coach for the last 2 years. But what I would say about Juwan is I think that he can have a better season with quotes around. I mean, I don't know how you quantify that or whatever, but a better season as far as when you view it, you say, okay, he had a better year as a senior. I don't know if his numbers will go up though, because there'll be so many other pieces contributing that his numbers may stay the same, but have just as big an impact, if not more. And I bet Juwan would like that, to have his numbers sort of stay the same and actually have more guys helping out and have a better season. The thing I would like to see from Juwan this year is the shooting percentages need to go up. His free throw percentage as a freshman was 80%, sophomore 73.9, last year 63.1. 3-point percentage as a freshman. Again, wasn't shooting that much, but 45.5%, 25% as a sophomore, and then 30.2% last year. Obviously, from 2-point range, he's great. He always will be, because when he's shooting from inside the arc, he's shooting 3 feet from the basket at most. And so everything else has increased and gotten better for Juwan, but the shooting percentages from the free throw line and the 3-point line have gone down. He's going to need to add that and make those better and improve in that area if he wants to be an NBA guy. And I'm sure that's what the NBA people told him, and rightfully so.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Andy, I posed this question to Alex on Podcast on the Brink, and I want to pose it to you guys too, and Andy, get your thoughts first. Is there any concern? Look, Juwan coming back is fantastic. It is the best possible outcome from Indiana's perspective. But if you think back to the beginning of last year, it kind of felt like Juwan was trying to showcase his outside game and his versatility, and he really struggled. He wasn't shooting well. It's almost like he was trying to shoot his way into confidence, and he just felt like he was really out of sync. Once he went inside and really focused on going down there, he was dynamite, and the offense ran through him. Do you have any concern about Indiana and Archie Miller trying to shoehorn in, featuring Juwan Morgan as a more versatile player and stepping out and doing some of the things that NBA teams will want to see, to the detriment of him going down low and doing the things that he can do at the college level, but probably won't be able to do at the NBA level?
No, I don't really have a I don't really have a concern about that. I do think, I'm sure that was some of the feedback that he received was about his outside shooting and trying to get better than that at that. So I think he'll certainly work on that. And I think if you can get his shooting to a point where you could put him and Romeo in, kind of a ball screen scenario where the defense really has to pick their poison and, maybe he can step out and hit it at least with some consistency. That would certainly help, but I don't necessarily think they're going to do that. And I think to go along with what you guys were talking about before and kind of what, Juwan's shooting percentages and things like that, I'll be interested to see this year with a deeper front court, at least eventually, how he might be able to change based on the position that he's forced to play, who he's forced to guard, who ends up guarding him. Because I think he ended up, some of that transition for him to play more inside was a little bit in the direct result of Duran getting hurt, and IU really needing more of an interior presence. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him this year compared to what they did before, and positionally how they do that. We talked about that on the show last week, just kind of the, what lineups you could really roll out there. And so I think that'll have an impact on the kinds of shots he gets and ultimately how successful he can be in making those. But I think I'm confident that he'll, really spend a lot of time working on that aspect of his game. And I think if he can just improve that by even a relatively small margin, it has a huge potential to help the offense in total.
What do you think about that, Ryan?
I don't know. I think that what I want to see from Indiana next year is Juwan put in a situation where he's fresh at the end of games, which we didn't see this year. I mean, so much was on his shoulders. And so I want them to be able to, as Andy was talking early in his statement about the pick and roll situation, put pressure on the defense with the pick and roll, pick your poison. I think Evan Fitzner is going to be a guy who they can do that with as well, because he can pick and pop and shoot threes. So I think that what I would like to see is a situation where they can give Juwan longer periods of rest, even though he probably won't need it as much this year, because again, as you get older, get more experience, you're in better shape. And he will be, I'm sure, this year. And I'm sure if you asked him to, he could play 40 minutes. But I think that what we saw last year with some of the guys on the team is they would wear down late in games, and Juwan was one of those guys. And when you have a guy, it's not just the minutes, it's when you have such a heavy load on a guy offensively and defensively, you see him wear down, you see him struggle late. And I think that's where some free throw issues come in as well. You don't concentrate as hard. It's just harder to, maintain your focus. So what I would love to see is for them to get him some breaks in games so that he can play that last 10 minutes for you if he needs to and be fresher than we saw this year. And so, whether it's a guy like Race Thompson, whether it's Fitzner, whether it's, whoever rotating in, taking some hits and some pops for him. That way, towards the end of the season, he's not as worn down, and towards the end of the games, he's not as worn down. That's what I think the biggest thing for Juwan moving forward is. And I think that is why there is such optimism about this year, is because this roster will have the ability to do that.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next segment. I've got a lineup thing that I want to talk about with you guys based on some comments Archie mentioned at Huber's, and we'll talk about some other comments that he had before we hop in and start answering some of these great questions that we got. So that is coming up here on the Assembly Call. We'll be right back. Stick with us.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
All right. 13:29. Let me quickly add up where we're at time-wise.
And then do you have to add, you had on the run sheet an add in the first part that you were going to add in. Do you have to add time for that to account for that for the radio, or do you not put those on the radio?
No, I just decided to skip it because we have a lot to go over.
Okay.
And it wasn't like a necessary one.
Okay.
By the way, I just said in the chat, because people are asking what the IU's future preseason opponents and all that stuff. And I said they're going to be in Maui in 2020. And I said I'm heavily pushing for Assembly Call to broadcast from Maui in 2020.
Dude.
Guys, you can write it off as a business trip. You realize that, right?
That would be awesome.
Yes. And I know the tournament director, he'd hook us up.
All right, let's talk about this. I mean, not right now, but
let's get the fall meetup done first, and then
yes.
What are we going to find out about Hoosier hysteria?
I don't know. I have not heard. Let me move this down here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this. All right, so lineup, and then I got some comments about Hubers, and we'll wrap on those for a little bit, and then we'll hop into some of these questions.
29-28 Golden State, minute left in the first.
Here we go.
LeBron is driving on Swaggy P. Oh, Cleveland just took the lead, 30-29.
That based on the first comment that you made, the second comment was
he passed it. Jordan Clarkson.
Oh, okay. Well, if you told me he passed it and it required someone else to make a shot, I would have probably guessed. I would probably bet against it. Right.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay, you guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back. You're listening to the Assembly Call. So here's a fun fact. We have over 5,600 IU fans from around the globe who subscribe to our email newsletter, and you can too. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. You will get our weekly Six-Banner Sunday news roundups as well as our post-game analysis emails once the season begins. It is all free, and it will make you a smarter and more well-informed IU basketball fan. Again, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 and join for free today. I am Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We just spent last segment talking about the impact of Juwan Morgan's return, and I want to talk a little bit about lineups with you guys. And I want to just run a thought by you that I had after, considering Juwan coming back, listening to Archie's comments at Hubers, and just taking into account a few things. Number one, it really doesn't sound like Duran is going to be ready early in the season, if he's ready at all, if he's at 100% at all next year.
I felt like we knew that,
Yeah. I mean, nothing earth-shattering there. We've been saying that for a long time, just based on the injury and his size.
And our vast medical knowledge, let's not forget that.
Of course,
Yes. I don't believe that Juwan came back to IU to play center for 5 months. And, without Duran there and, some young guys that are unproven, you start putting some lineups together, and it's really easy to just slot him in that 5 spot. And I'm not sure he came back to IU to do that for 5 months. Archie loves Zach McRoberts. I mean, his comments about Zach McRoberts are always effusive. So his minutes aren't just going to be given away. And Archie even talked about expanding his role offensively if he can shoot with more confidence. And there's really nothing yet to suggest that Race Thompson, Clifton Moore, or Jake Forrester are ready to step in right away and play. All those guys have great potential. We have high hopes for all of them. But when you talk about who's going to line up, opening night, the first month of the season, we have no reason to think yet that any of those guys are ready because we haven't seen them play. And we know that we still don't have a lot of proven shooting. We expect the shooting to be better this year, but not a lot of it is proven at the college level yet. So as I started thinking about the lineup, obviously Romeo is going to be in the lineup. Juwan Morgan's going to be in the lineup. And I think based on Archie's comments, Devonte Green certainly seems penciled into the lineup right now. And so then you've got 2 spots left. And, you've got to figure out, is Juwan going to be at the 5? Is there going to be someone else playing center? And then what do you do with Justin Smith and Zach McRoberts? Because if you're going to get both of them in the lineup, now you've got Juwan at the 5. And again, I just wonder if that's where, or no, he would be at the 5 if all 5.
Oh, if all 5 are starting. Okay, I thought you had if only one of them.
No, and so this is why I'm really starting to wonder if we won't see at the beginning of the year Evan Fitzner as a guy who's in the lineup to start. And I say that because then he would play the 5, and that would keep Juwan from having to be in there. And Archie has talked about his shooting, and on a team that's devoid of it, I think it's going to be hard for Archie to keep a guy who shoots 40% from three-point range and has proven to do it off the court, which would mean that either Justin or Zach starts and the other guy is the 6th man. So as I start piecing it together and kind of thinking about what makes the most sense projecting forward, that lineup is starting to make more sense to me than one where you've got Zach and Justin in there and Juwan playing the 5. It's all speculation at this point, but I think if I had to place a bet on what the lineup would be, I would go with that and then flip a coin between whether it's Justin or Zach starting at the 3. Your thoughts, Andy?
Interesting theory. I think Race Thompson could potentially factor in as the 5th guy. Archie, in some of the comments that I listened to, he talked about, Fitzner really, also being in that learning mode with some of the other guys. He talked about there certainly more continuity this year, but I think, I think he also mentioned a Race specifically about, having been able to be around and kind of what he was able to do. So I think he's a guy who, I think he's like 6'8" or so, could potentially be in that scenario. What you're saying is entirely plausible. But I would say that Race might be the other guy that you could throw in at that spot. I think all the other, kind of the lead up to that and the assumptions that you're making there make sense to me. And then you just kind of tweak everything else around it. But I think if I was going to argue one potential alternative to what you said, I think Race Thompson would probably be the guy that I would bring up.
Well, and Fitzner's going to have to learn how to play the pack line too, the pack line defense, and that's going to be a big consideration too. So
it's a lot easier to learn that as a post guy than a perimeter guy, I would say. So I don't think he'll have too much trouble there. But I will also say, you said that you don't think Juwan Morgan came back to play the 5. I don't think Evan Fitzner transferred to sit on the bench. I'm not saying he'll start, but he came to play. And that's, so we've always talked about that. What's the starting lineup? Does it really matter? Is it more about, who's on the floor for the most minutes? I think we all agree that's far more important than who's actually out there as a starter. I would say I think that you're going to see a lot of lineup mixing early in the season just so Archie sees how these guys fit together, see how a Race fits next to a Justin Smith maybe at the 4 and Race at the 5. And when Juwan Morgan's not on the floor, obviously, does Juwan Morgan play more of a wing position in some lineups and then go? And I think that's the thing about Juwan Morgan is he's so versatile that he can just straight up play the 5 if he needs to. And I think that you're probably right, Jerod, that he came back to sort of, showcase that he can do more than just be a straight post guy. And I think that if he wants to have an NBA career, he's going to need to do that. But at the same time, I think that if the team needs that, if the team's best lineup is to have Justin Smith at the 4, Zach McRoberts as the other one of the 3 perimeter guys, and Juwan at the 5, we're going to see a lot of that. And I think that we will see a lot of that. I don't know if it's going to be the starting lineup they run out there, but I think we're going to see a lot of that early in the season. And I agree with Andy. I think that Race is an X factor because we haven't seen him much, but I think that he's a guy who certainly, based on what he did in high school, his size, and what we expect as far as his development moving forward, I think he's a guy who could certainly step in and do that. And I think he's a guy who could also, like Juwan, sort of fill a stretch 4 role once his jump shot develops a little more.
Yeah. You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. So we had the Hoosiers event Wednesday night. Archie, had his media availability, gave a nice speech to the packed house that was there. It was almost 1,000 people who were there. I talked about the comments that he made about Zach McRoberts. We alluded a little bit to the comments that he made about Deron Davis. I thought the other most compelling statements that he made were about Devonte Green. And we got a question actually from Joel. He said, does Archie talk about Devonte Green differently than other players? Seems like he's trying to talk himself and Green into reaching Green's potential. Talked about Devonte more last night than any other player, and he did. I mean, he was going player by player and, was pretty quick on, guys like Justin Smith and some others, but really lingered on Devonte. And it's interesting coming on the heels of the episode that we did about, whether Devonte Green can break out as a junior, because you really got the sense from Archie's comments. And again, I don't think you guys have actually heard the comments, but you really got the sense that he had a sit-down talk with Devonte Green about how good do you want to be. And not necessarily like a friendly chat, but a chat that maybe had a little bit of an edge to it. Like, look, you've got a chance to be really good, but you've got to decide if you want to just accept the talent that you have and go with that, or if you really want to get better. And again, some of this is reading between the lines, but it sounded like from what Archie said that Devonte really responded well, had a great spring. He said Devonte shot the ball as well as anybody he's been around since he got to Indiana, other than James Blackman Jr. And, again, it's not like Indiana shot very well last year, but that's still.
Yeah, that's kind of a backhanded compliment.
Well, yeah, but still, it alludes to maybe the light bulb going on. It's interesting. Someone tweeted me Danny Green, his brother's basketball reference page, and you look at it, he didn't do a whole lot as a freshman and sophomore at North Carolina and really stepped up as a junior and senior. Now, look, a lot of guys do that. It's not just to say that, there's something special about the Green family, but, maybe those guys take a couple of years and the light bulb comes on. And so it's just, I think if you're looking for reasons to believe in Devonte Green, to me, that is one more kind of notch on that belt to say, this seems like a positive thing. Because I do think Archie believes in him. I think he believes in his talent. I think he has always talked very positively about him, and even when he's criticizing him, it's with an eye toward how good he can be. So that to me was the most important comment, Andy, that I heard from Archie at Huber's, and it doesn't lessen my enthusiasm for Devonte's potential breakout as a junior.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think two things are going on. I think he knows how good he can be, and he knows how good he needs him to be. Because the more that you step back and you really look at what this team has, I mean, that is, yeah, you could argue guard depth, you could argue, inexperience, some of those kinds of things, but the real make or break position, situation, whatever you want to call it, for this team is going to be the point guard. And so I don't think he's saying that in terms of trying to talk himself into it, or, kind of wish casting and hoping that what he's saying is going to come true. I don't think he's doing that. But I think the comments underscore his understanding as a former point guard. I think that's probably enhanced a little bit of just how important Devonte is. And I think to a certain extent, he wants to convey that to Devonte, that this team can potentially go as far as he's able, to lead them from that spot in the lineup. And while that is a lot to put on somebody, I think we know that Archie's not a guy who, beats around the bush and isn't going to come out and say something. So I think if that kind of conversation did happen that you described, I think that was a lot of it, that, there's a lot on your shoulders, but you can really be the guy who helps get this team over the hump that they missed so much last season.
Ryan, your thoughts on just that topic?
When we talked about Devonte, we talked about maturity, and he needed to sort of decide, as we said, he needed to decide how good he wanted to be. I mean, did he want to just be a guy who flashes, or does he want to be consistent? And maybe he won't have as many flashy plays if he plays with consistency, but he would be an overall better player, and Indiana would be better for it. So with him, I'm not surprised at all that Archie seemed to have that conversation with him, but it was much needed. And I think that Devonte is a guy who, given his personality and the quotes we've seen from him in the past, I'm not surprised that he would respond positively to a challenge like that. So we'll see. I think that, it's all talk until you're on the floor, but at the same time, I think that it's very important that he's a guy that Indiana can rely on this year for consistency, which is something we didn't see last year.
I feel like that should be the new tagline for our show. Ironically, it's all talk until you're on the floor. The only other comment that I thought was interesting was what Archie said about Robert Finney, and it shouldn't come as a surprise. He said, Robert is a really smart basketball player. We expect him to produce early on, but he even said, in part because of need, just because we don't have that many guards. So it wasn't like he was necessarily elevating him over the other guys, over the other freshmen. It was almost like he was very careful to be very measured in his comments about the freshmen, but he did say that he expects him to play an important role this year because he's going to have to. And I agree. And from all accounts, it seems like he'll be ready to do that. So that'll be interesting to watch. Andy, anything else from Huber's that jumped out to you?
No, I've kind of seen bits and pieces of it at this point, but yeah, I mean, definitely the Devonte Green stuff stood out. The Jerod, we already mentioned that. So no, I think the big thing is, you talked a little bit about competition. I guess that'd be the only thing that I would add. And I think this is going to be a team that Archie is going to really like to coach and watch practice, because with so many new faces, and we were able to get through essentially three guys that we felt confident would be in the starting lineup. And even one of those we've kind of talked about would be, kind of a breakout to really grab and hold on to that spot. There are a lot of minutes up for grabs and a lot of guys who are capable of taking them. And so I think, that kind of competition and the speed with which some of the young guys can really start to understand the concepts and things like that. I think we are going to see, as Ryan said, a lot of, mixing and matching of lineups early in the season. And a lot of ebbs and flows, I think, over the course of it, as guys, take hold of and lose a grip on some of those spots and some of those minutes. But I think that's going to make it fun to watch, to really see who emerges, because there's a lot of unknowns on the roster that it makes it hard for us to really speculate who that's going to be, other than the fact that I think he's going to enjoy that aspect of it. And I think that's something that he really wants to have, and will really love to see in the team.
Yep. All right. Coming up in our final segment, we are going to answer your questions. As I mentioned, a lot of good ones came in. Nick wonders what player will replace the void left by Robert Johnson and Andy's fan club. And we got a great question about, have you ever felt more confident about the trajectory of both the basketball and football programs at the same time? I've got a specific date to put on it. We'll get to that next.
Well, there's people.
All right. 14-25. What's the score, Ryan?
Let me unmute myself. Cleveland's up 42-35 with 7:35 left. But Golden State's missing a lot of wide open threes, so I think those are going to start falling pretty soon.
It's happening.
They're just toying with them until the third quarter.
Yeah, which is what they always do. LeBron is dominating, though. No one can guard him.
See, and he usually, he says game ones are feel-out games. I had a feeling he wasn't going to treat it like that because this might be their best chance to win.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if they
know that.
I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland's going to take a game. I would have picked them to win this one, just because the Warriors came off a tough series. You know that they're going to be a little tired and they haven't had as many days off.
We got a good amount of time for this segment. We got about 8 minutes, so we can roll through some of these questions here. Let me. You want to look at these and see if there's any that you particularly want me to kick to you, because we don't all need to chime in on all of them.
Who is IU more likely to schedule? I like that one.
Okay, we will kick that one to you.
I don't even know how tall everybody is on the lineup.
Well, I mean, the only guys who are under 6'5" are Devonte, Robert Finney, and Al Durham.
Really?
I was going to say, yeah, damn near all of the lineups.
Yeah.
I think would have.
That's true. I guess I didn't think about that. I always think of Romeo.
I think we could bring it up.
I always think of Romeo being shorter than he is because he plays like a guard, but he's really the size of a wing, a college wing.
I think the Clifton Moore question is interesting. I don't know that we have specific insight into it, but I think it's probably worth addressing because I think that's somebody who people.
Do you think if Davis doesn't show more
quickness, just don't know anything about either one of those guys, really.
De'Ron Davis, do you think if he doesn't show more quickness and effort, take that off? I mean, there's no.
That's why it's at the question.
Consistent jumper, we'll put him ahead of Green. I don't know about being put ahead of Green.
Yeah.
People are talking about.
I do think he might be a little bit overlooked given the guard depth. I don't know that he ends up being the point guard, but.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a role for him, for Durham, no matter what.
Oh, yeah, because of his defense alone.
Yeah.
I mean.
And his ability to get to the basket. I mean, he's good at
Yeah. And that right-handed floater, man, so pretty.
It is. He can do some good things. All right, so let's we'll hop in here.
Yeah.
And we will do this.
This show's moved fast.
The show has moved fast.
Because we've got stuff to talk about.
It's because you've been watching the finals game while we're talking.
I actually have not been really watching it, surprisingly. Usually when there's like a big game on, I'm like, and listening, but not tonight. I've just seen LeBron do some pretty sick drives.
Okay, let's do it. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. And we've got a bunch of good questions, and we actually got a nice sizable chunk here in this final segment to get to some of them. So very happy about that. All right, so let's start rolling through. We will start with Nick's question. Which player will replace the void left by Robert Johnson and Andy's fan club? Andy, are you even prepared to take on the responsibilities of another fan club so soon after helming the Robert Johnson fan club for 3 seasons?
I know who I'm guessing, but go ahead, Andy.
I don't know. It might be too soon. Luckily, I don't have to decide until a little bit later in the season. But you'd like to you'd like to take a 4-year guy. I've contemplated just turning it into a Robert fan club and just keeping it with Finney, and
that's what I was going to think
moving forward there. But I don't know if I'm ready for another commitment like that quite yet.
All right, let me ask this, because the Robert Johnson thing, that happened very organically. And it was because, you always seem to be defending him more than anybody else. And so it became kind of a joke, and then it became a thing. Is this now something where we should be like actively choosing someone, or is this something that gets bestowed upon us by the other people because of just things that happened during the show? I'm not sure what the best way for it to happen is.
That's fair. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I listened to the Around the NFL podcast, and they always pick a team of that they follow over the course of the year, and they make a point not to pick a team until it's a certain amount into the season. So, so yeah, maybe I hold off and wait. Because I remember doing that when Chaney graduated. I was like, well, who's going to be like the next player? I don't remember who I chose, but I feel like I chose poorly, however it ended up. Obviously nobody could fill those shoes, but it was one of those like, all right, well, I need a new favorite player now that he's gone. And I think in my haste, I made a poor choice. So I don't want to
Steve Hart or Monty Marcaccini.
I don't think I made that poor choice.
Okay. All right, next question. This is from Hank Hill on Acid, who continues to have one of the best Twitter names of people who ask us questions. Have you ever felt more confident about the trajectory of the program, actually the programs, with Archie and Tom Allen at the helm, not necessarily next season, but the next 5 to 10 seasons? I think it's been a while. I mean, there's a lot to feel good about with both programs right now, and that hasn't often happened simultaneously. But I will tell you the last time that for sure we were all feeling better, and actually went through and pinpointed the exact date. And it's November 4th, 1991. Okay. Because back in 1991, Indiana football, led by the incomparable Bill Mallory, was 5-2. They were ranked number 25 in the country. They had promising youngsters along the defensive line, Charles Beauchamp, Hervin McCormick. I mean, the defensive line that would just be so stout in 93, those guys were all young. Plus you had Thomas Lewis, and Trent Green was a junior. So there was a lot of promise there. And that season, Indiana was preseason number 2 with an incredible mix of experience, Calvert and Greg and Eric Anderson, and then a bunch of youth with Damon Bailey and Alan Henderson, and obviously the guy that, at the time we all thought was the greatest basketball coach alive, Bob Knight. So you were feeling really good. So everything seemed possible with both programs. And I don't know if there's maybe been a time before that, in between, but I'm going back to November 4th, 1991, because it seemed like optimism for both programs was pretty high then. Andy, do you have any other dates or any other general times that you think might fit?
I mean, it's hard to think of another one because to have actual, optimism for football that wasn't completely unfounded. There aren't many times where you had that. Then you just have to be able to then say, all right, at the same time that you had optimism for the basketball program. So you're probably right in about that wheelhouse, because that was where, from a football perspective, things shortly thereafter, kind of turned south, and then have never really rebounded. I don't remember, as someone who attended IU during the Cam Cameron era, I don't ever recall feeling confidence in the football program at that point. Perhaps the low point was when he decided on an early September game in Bloomington that was as hot as could be with a noon kickoff to wear all black jerseys. That seemed like a good idea.
Genius.
So that worked out really well. So yeah, and then never really felt good about DiNardo. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know the basketball program, even when like Hepner was there, that would be the other time, at least the football program, if you want to look at it that way, was like there was at least somewhat ascendant, but I don't know that the
coach
about the basketball program were quite the same at that point. So no, you're probably pretty close. Would be my guess. Excellent work pinpointing the exact date.
Thank you. All right, Ryan, we have a scheduling question. This is from Patrick. Outside of marquee non-conference games, what kind of teams games would you like to see Indiana play? He says, I love the regional home with teams like Evansville and Ball State, Valpo, Ohio, etc. What would you like to see? And we've talked about this before, and I think we're on the same page with Patrick in a certain respect. Those are good games to have.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I would give those teams an away game. Because Indiana's getting away games with Archie against good opponents, or at least neutral floor games that they weren't getting before. So I would say, yeah, if you want to play Evansville, Ball State, Valpo, Ohio, throw in some MAC teams just in general. I mean, any of those teams as home games, I would do it, certainly. I don't like the going on the road to a place like that because there's really nothing to gain from doing that because you're expected to win. I know it's playing on the road and you get a road win, hopefully, but at the same time, you're setting yourself up for a chance at getting upset by playing on the road. Yeah, I mean, you could always get upset at home, but I think that you get the money for the program by playing the home game that you don't really get on the road, and B, it gets your guys used to playing in the arena and that they're going to have to defend during Big Ten season. I would prefer that than doing home away home.
Pete asks, who is IU more likely to schedule, Kentucky or Georgia? Reading this question just made me laugh. I don't think there's any chance Tom Crean would schedule Indiana simply because he seems to schedule from a there's
Maybe
a lot
if IU
of,
joins the SWAC, then maybe there's a chance.
It's just he
leave the Big Ten. No,
he's insecurity seems to drive his scheduling philosophy, so I just don't see that happening.
I think he would schedule IU.
No way.
I think he would schedule
No.
IU.
I was trying to think of what other school could you have. Is there any other school that you could put in place of Kentucky in that question that I would have taken Georgia, and I have yet to think of one.
I guarantee you we will never be pulling this statement out and being like, hey, was Ryan right? There's no
I don't know. I think he would
Not
not now, but maybe in a few years. I think he might. I think it would be. I don't think it would be at IU though. That's the thing, and that like I don't think he would do a road game at IU.
See, I think that would be the only reason that he would
just
do
play
it.
it at Georgia Tech, and then get.
Yeah. All right, that's
no.
That's silly.
That's a good answer, Andy. Okay, let's hit up this last one. This is from Jonathan. He says, how many lineups will we see that have 4 players who are 6'5" and above, Andy? Give the only guys who are under 6'5" on this roster are Devonte Green, Al Durham, and Rob Finney. So we're definitely going to see some tall lineups.
I would guess you'd see almost all of them. I mean, I could see times when you would play Durham at the off guard, but that is largely when Romeo might not be in, or maybe you slide Romeo to the 3, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I would think almost all of them. This is one of the, while there isn't necessarily a ton of top end height, there's a lot of wing guys in that 6'5" to 6'7" range. So I think you'll see almost exclusively lineups like that.
Yep. All right. And that is all the time that we have for questions. So that will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording, or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter or text IU to 66866. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. Perfect. Nice job, gentlemen. That was
and a breakaway dunk by Durant just tied it at 53. Golden State's on a 13-2 run.
It's over. Man, their ability to just go on back.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Runs
they can be down 20 and get that back in 3 minutes. Like it's
remember that run Indiana had against Michigan where it was like 26-0 to end the first half? Like Golden State does that.
Oh, Draymond just smacked James in the face. And Draymond, of course, argued the call.
Suspend him.
As you would expect.
That's another comparison that I hear for Juwan sometimes, which is Draymond Green. And you can kind of see it, but I think people forget. I think people forget Draymond Green in college was he had like one of the top 100 assist rates in the country.
Yeah. No.
And like he was creating for guys, and he was an elite defensive rebounder. Like Juwan's a good defensive rebounder, but Draymond was like 25, 26% or something crazy like that. Now Juwan's a better shooter, but all those comparisons are fun, but imperfect. All right. Well, good show, gentlemen. Go. Yep. Go post.
Later, buddy. Later, guys.
All right. See you guys next week. We'll see you all next week. Yep. Hey, are the NBA Finals going to be on Thursday again next week?
I don't know.
Probably.
I haven't even looked at the schedule. Probably, but
that'll be probably like game 3 based on the way they have the schedule laid out.
People are asking for Assembly Call Radio after dark. I think they want like a Mystery Science 3000 thing, but for the Mystery Science Theater, but for
no, it looks like Wednesday. Actually, Wednesday is game 3. I wasn't that far off, so
nice.
All right. Later, guys.
Right. See y'all.
See you.
Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.